I think there are two perspectives or two key points to focus on. One is who is transmitting the message from your front line to the top management, which is basically the middle management, right? So how strong is your middle management able to percolate information from your front line to, yeah, exactly. The second element is related to the culture of the company, right? Is the culture of the company encouraging the front line to speak up, or is it punishing the people who are speaking up? Yeah. If these 2 points are addressed, largely, the bridge between or the divide between knowledge that the top management has versus what the front line has is going to be covered. It's like, let's say you take Modi, for example. I don't want to get into politics, but let's say you take Modi versus any other political party. The essence is that the leadership is very well connected with what's happening on the ground, right? And the reason for that is you get into the people, you understand what's happening at a ground level. And that's the only way to know what is.
But how to know that? How we build a culture where operations insights are appreciated rather than being criticized and taking into consideration.
It's largely
how we can build
a
that
positive
type of
reinforcement and looking at really encouraging thoughts than criticizing people who come up with opinions from over. It might be the most stupidest thought, right? But it still has value because it shows that the culture is that of motivating people to speak up. Yeah. So, we have seen that in companies like Novartis, like Unilever, where, the front line is very well connected with the top management, either through channels that Debashish has mentioned, like a simple sunshine kind of a portals where, people can just put in their thoughts, or you look at how middle management and top management can really walk through the lanes of the front line to understand what's happening. Yeah.
Just to add on that HR piece that he spoke about, right? How do you build that culture where opinions are heard, and even if it is contrary to the strategy or a view that you have, you still do not, the HR policies and processes are around that nobody is, hurting you at the end of the year. So as long as that is being maintained, I think that could come in very handy as well.
Some kind of HR policies could be framed.
Correct.
In that sense.
Around that, right?
Okay.
I think the context again is very important, right? There are industries which are very innovation driven, right? And I've spent a long time at Google, which is at the forefront of tech innovation, right? For many, many years. The need of the hour there was to encourage grounds up innovation, right? So the way it used to work there is the VP level folks would put high level strategic goals, but the actual what features, what needs to be built used to come down at product manager level or at a tech lead level, where they would come up with new features. And of course, everything gets aligned to the overall strategic goals, but a lot of focus on grounds up innovation. But that was the need of that industry. Right now, if you take any other industry, let's say take a very traditional manufacturing setup, maybe they don't need that kind of a thing, right? Maybe that will create chaos, right? So I think the context is different. If you take this example further, right? Like, my father spent 20 plus years in the Air Force. Right now in the army, you simply can't have that kind of a system. So I feel context is very important. Today I run a startup. Now here, I will not do like a voting system within my team saying, okay, what feature needs to be built, right? I will take that call because we don't have enough time. We need to win customers, right? So I feel it's very nuanced. It depends on the context, and the responsibility really lies on the leader to figure out what is the right balance. And grounds up, taking feedback from the ground can have multiple reasons to do that. One is, of course, you want to become more efficient. You want to know what is possible, what is not possible. The other could be more people oriented, where you just want to motivate people that, hey, your voice is being heard. Right now, the leader needs to figure out how to use that feedback, right?
What type of business insights from operations?
What type of business? Yeah. And at that point in time, what do you need? Like, let's say there's a lot of attrition happening in your startup, right? You want to give a message out that, hey, I'm really here and this is your company. You want to give your ideas will be implemented. Then you do more of that, right? So I think, again, it's very timing specific as well. So a lot really goes on in terms of, what the leader decides and what is right in that moment for that company.
So how does it go is in your law firms?
Yeah. Certainly, I think, having the connection with the ops team
and getting, you need to, as leaders, you need to have your ears close to the ground. There's no doubt. You need to be, cognizant of what's going on. There's a lot of customer feedback or client feedback that will come in, or there could be challenges in terms of issues, or there are new developments that, the leadership needs to know in a lot of these projects or whatever. So it is important to have that connect. Of course, smaller organizations, it's easier to have a team meeting or, periodic meeting with the team and get the juniors to speak up and things. Much larger organizations, you need to have, dashboards and all are very prevalent even in our kind of a smaller organization. But in larger organizations, that constant communication is very critical. That is something we need to keep in mind. But at the same time, you may not be able to take all the feedback. Filtration is important because you need to run the organization. Tomorrow there is a challenge, you need to see how somebody else can address it. If there is not everything can hinder your leadership or the strategic goals. So you need to see what is important.
I'll pick up from where ma'am has left off. You have to cut the noises more to press play. When you're going bottom up approach, every suggestion is not your suggestion. Every suggestion doesn't work. All right. You should be able to politely say that, yes, you are empowered, but is this the situation where this works out? That's a call a leader will take. Every suggestion, everyone feels that I'm empowered, so I'll give you a suggestion. You have to implement it. You'll go chaotic. It becomes really chaotic. So how do a leader filters the noise and make those strategies that works, pulling up the strings to make sure that it works, is the art. Secondly, empowerment. Yes, you should make people feel empowered to make suggestions. That's the culture that you want to drive in. Have multiple frameworks that make people be heard of their voices. Maybe a suggestion scheme or a quality conscious efforts in pay. Come up with your own gembas in a manufacturing situation. Bring in your own concept. You are the empowered to do your stuff. With this is the target that in mind. All that will work, but at what cost is what the leader has to make. In fact, what this makes is that as a leader, you should understand my target is to change the game. If I'm going to follow the same thing, what is coming up from my team, they are going in a direction which will serve my market. But I have to address the unattended needs of the customer. Where do I pull those strings? All this comes from the basics. All right. So how do I improve those basics to up the game and then take them to a level what I need? I can't bring them up to the fourth floor directly. Let me make a middle part of coming up to the second floor, make them understand, realize where my ambitions are, and then go up from there. Maybe that could be a strategy where you come down the elevator, you pulling up your team up the ladder, make a ground and move up together. Maybe a strategy that could work. So in fact, what do I mean to say is that both are important. You, as a strategic leader, you cannot do your operational stuff. As an operational leader, you cannot think on strategical aspect when you are bounded to your tactical day-to-day activities. It has to integrate. So you have to find a balance to manage between. That's the reason most of the companies, what do they do is that after a strategic stint, they transfer their employees to the operational stuff. Make them understand the realities for 2 or 3 years and then go to the next strategic level. It's a kind of learning phase where you are being a part of a team where it's going to be a cyclical going up and down the ladder, understanding the team and then
going up. That's interesting take. Yeah, going up and down, taking an operational role and then moving to a strategic level to understand.
A lot of organization does a rotation kind of a program.
That's the reason most of the companies groom the leaders within. If you see a manufacturing where most of the top leaders, your production head of the entire industry will be a guy who would have grown up the ladder. All right. Wherein most of your R&D experts will come outside, bringing them outside. It's all because of you are integrating the organization together. It's a beautiful magical strings that you have to play around as a leader.
So you play some time in the assembly line, sometimes in the quality control department, sometimes in your strategic teams and things like that. So that's how the rotation makes you a much more well-rounded sort of leader to take on bigger roles.
I remember when I started my career, you have a PhD, you have done this, so you're developing a product, and you go to the shop floor. Okay. I remember my first product. I went to the shop floor. There was a line in charge for a specific unit operation, lyophilization, called Arul. I'll never forget him. So I went there, PhD hai, pura develop kiya hai. I went there with the recipe. He looked at it, साबे नहीं चलेगा.
साबे नहीं चलेगा.
But you have the ego, right? नहीं, मैं बोल रहा हूँ, आप चलाओ. 2 days later, I didn't have a product. It was melt back. Okay, it failed. The cycle failed. Then the humility kicks in. Then I ended up learning a lot, not from the book, by the experience of that guy. What he has been doing that day in and day out. He knows exactly how it works. He can look at the vial inside the lyophilizer. He can say that water content is this much. That's his level of experience. And what always I have seen that this conundrum between strategy / boardroom versus shop floor / operation. Always this conundrum. And yes, we have people coming from the bottom up. You have certain experience. But remember, by the time this guy has reached that level of leadership, things would have changed drastically. And he had built up a lot of ego. So he knows that, okay, what this guy is telling is right, but his ego will not allow that. To accept that there is a guy telling the truth, he is screaming and telling that this, whatever strategy you have created on a PowerPoint, sitting in a boardroom, is not going to work on the ground. And you mentioned about Gemba. I'm a personal big follower of Gemba because that has worked 100% all the time. If there is something wrong there, we always tell, just take the next flight, go to the facility, sit with the operator, understand what has gone wrong there or right, what he has done right, what he has done differently. Because if there is a commercial production which has run 100, 150 batches, if suddenly you start getting failures, you have to go to the shop floor. You cannot sit in the boardroom. That's what I personally have seen. Yeah.
See, the art of a leader is to know when he should pull out of the operational stuff. All right. If you get too much of involved into the operational activities, then you're not required to be sitting on a boardroom. When you are an operational guy, you're talking on too much of strategies, then you're not fit to be sitting on the operational side. Both are leaders in their own way. I don't say one is higher and the other one is lower. The value would be different. However, the art of a leader is to pull back and say, this is where I let it go. It is up to you to deliver.
So there's a fine line.
There's a fine line. And this fine line comes with experience, humility, and yes, he should let go the ego. All right, the ego. Yes, he said is right. What he said is right. Maybe let's try up. At the end, it's a product which has become successful. And if you are successful, the entire team and the leader is getting the credits. All right. So I would rather say that we will not take a side of saying that the strategy is the much more important or not listening to the tactical team, or we'll not take a side of tactical team is much more need of the hour, not the strategy. We'll not take a side. We have to take a side of how to balance a ship and make the ship sail through the waters.